the CS National Treasury, the PS National Treasury, my fellow colleague commissioners, my fellow colleagues SRC, distinguished guests from the media, good morning. So we are here today just to talk about one item, which is the remuneration and benefits for state and other public officers for the period 2023-24 and 2024-25. So allow me, as I begin, to just state the mandate of the Commission, because the remuneration and benefit is set based on the mandate of the national and county governments on remuneration and benefits for other public officers. While setting and advising on remuneration and benefits payable in the public service, SRC is guided by principles set out in Article 230, Sub-Article 5 of the Constitution and Section 12 of the SRC Act 2011. These constitutional principles are the need to ensure that the total compensation is fiscally sustainable, the need to ensure that the public service can attract and retain the skills required to execute their functions, the need to recognize performance and productivity, and transparency and fairness. The fifth principle from the SRC Act is equal remuneration to persons for work of equal value, as required in Section 12 of the SRC Act 2011. Ladies and gentlemen, with that context, allow me now to talk through the rationales for the current remuneration review cycle. Broadly, and we look at the overarching rationale, is that the review is about harmonization to achieve equity and fairness in remuneration and benefits in the public service within the principle of affordability and fiscal sustainability. With that broad overarching rationale, I will now run you through the key rationales for this review. And these are: 1, pursuant to Section 11E of SRC Act, SRC set a 4-year review cycle for remuneration and benefits in the public service, with the first cycle running for the period 2013-2014 to 2016-2017, and the second cycle for the period 2017-2018 to 2020-2021. The third remuneration and benefit review cycle covers the financial year 2021-22 to 24-25. Due to economic conditions occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic, SRC, in consultation with the National Treasury, froze the salary structures for the first 2 years of the third cycle, that is 2021-22 to 2022-2023. In 2022, the economy sustained the growth momentum that started in 2021 after the recovery from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, a review for the third and fourth year of the review cycle. The second rationale is on attraction and retention of requisite skills. SRC undertook an international labor market survey for state officers and local labor market surveys for other public officers to determine the positioning of gross remuneration structure for public institutions. This was to inform the development of remuneration structures that align to market trends, so as to ensure attraction and retention of requisite skills. The surveys revealed that gross salaries for some public service institutions are below the target 50th percentile, while others are above. Just to give you a quick summary, is that state officers are at 45th percentile, state corporations are above at 89th percentile, Civil service in both national and county governments are below. They are at 39th percentile. Teaching service is below at 36th percentile. Public universities are close to the target. They are at 49th percentile. Other public officers, which includes constitutional commissions, that's the secretariat staff, are above at 84th percentile. These figures demonstrate that there are state corporations, there are public service institutions that are below the 50th percentile, some are above. And therefore, as a result of that, this review seeks therefore to adjust remuneration and benefit structures that are below the target market positioning of the 50th percentile to ensure attraction and retention of requisite skills to the extent of affordability and fiscal sustainability. It therefore hence will retain the salary structures for institutions that are already at 50th and above. The third rationale is on equity and fairness. Due to historical reasons, the public service has disparate remuneration and benefit structures. The different market positioning ranging from 36th percentile to 89th percentile as earlier remunerated are actually a demonstration of the disparities that we have in the remuneration structures. And therefore, this review seeks to adjust salary structures that are below 50th percentile so as to achieve equity and fairness through harmonization to the extent of affordability and fiscal sustainability. Further, SRC undertook job evaluation to determine the relative worth of jobs to ensure equal remuneration to persons for work of equal value. This review takes into account the implementation of job evaluation grading results and the resultant salary structures to achieve equity and fairness to the extent of affordability and fiscal sustainability. Fourth is cost of living adjustment. The review cushions against loss of purchasing power arising from the erosion in the real value of remuneration and benefits to the extent of affordability and fiscal sustainability. 5 is legal compliance. The review ensures compliance with the statutory minimum wage. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to speak about the salient features of the third remuneration review cycle. And these are: 1, the review covers the entire public service, both state and other public officers, within the extent of affordability and fiscal sustainability, read together with the other 4 principles. Number 2, the average increase is 7 to 10% over a 2-year period, inclusive of the existing notch increase, which averages 3% annually. 3, progressive harmonization of remuneration structures to achieve equity and fairness, thus adjustment of remuneration structures that are below the 50th percentile market positioning, while freezing salary structures that are above the 50th percentile. 4, where the salary structures are retained or frozen, the notch increase will continue as budgeted up to 2023-24 is 1st July 2023. So let me now speak about the implications of the review on the wage bill, starting with the budget implications. So pursuant to the constitutional principle of affordability and fiscal sustainability, SRC engaged the National Treasury on funding. the National Treasury advised SRC to consider reviewing remuneration structures within a budget allocation of 21.7 billion for the year 2023-2024, which is distributed as follows, and I will quickly run you through how it is distributed. So the executive in the state officers in the executive will be allocated 126 million, which is 0.6% of the total allocation. Parliament state officers is 78 million, which is 0.4% of the total allocation. Judiciary state officers is 305 million, which is 1.4% of the allocation. County state officers is 408 million, which is 1.9%. Teaching service is 9.5 billion, which is 44.2% of the total allocation. The civil service is 1.8 billion, which is 8.5%. The county government is 4 billion, which is 18.8%. Uniformed and disciplined forces, 4.5 billion, which is 20.9%. And other public officers, 745 million, which is 3.4%. So that is the budget allocation, which we shall provide you with those numbers later, and you will see the details. The other implication on the wage bill is the current wage bill ratios. Where does this take us to once we implement this budget allocation of 21? And I will just talk through very few numbers. You will see later in the press release that we shall give you, you'll be able to interrogate the numbers. But what I would like to point out is just a few of these. The first one is compensation to employees, which is the total wage bill. Is currently around 987 billion, and it will now go to 1 trillion in 2021-22. You will see the figures later. So it has been rising, but one of the reasons for that increase is the number of employees. Again, you will see the figures that it has been growing, and we are now close to 1 million, to be projected to 968 million in 2023-24. 968,000, so it's just about a million. Now let me speak about the implication in terms of the ratios that we normally track. The first one is we normally look at the wage bill to GDP, and we also look at the wage bill to revenue. The wage bill to revenue, there is a target in the Public Finance Management Act which stipulates that not more than 35% of the revenue is to be spent on the wage bill. And in terms of ratio to GDP, we use an average for developing countries, which is at 7.5%. On those two important ratios, on the ratio to GDP, we are actually at 7.74, which is very close to target. That is projected to 7.58 and projected in 2023, which is this financial year, to 7.19. So it means we are actually on target compared to developing countries. We will be within the average for developing countries. In terms of wage bill to revenue, and this is ordinary revenue, we are currently at 47.06, so it's about 47%. In 2022 is projected to 43.5% and is further projected to 40.45%, meaning that it's showing a trajectory towards the 35%. So the message here is that when we look at the wage bill in absolute terms, which you will see in the numbers, it will continue to grow in absolute terms. And the reason for that growth is largely because as a developing country, we shall continue to recruit in key sectors, that is health, teaching, and security. Indeed, as a country, we are yet to achieve the desired ratios for teacher to student, or healthcare to population ratio, or security to population ratio. So those are the areas that we will continue to recruit, and therefore in absolute terms, the wage bill will grow. However, what we must therefore continuously watch is that ratio to revenue and to GDP. So how then do we move to the desired ratio of 35%? Because for the GDP ratio, we can see that we are pretty much where we should be based on the projections, but on the ratio to wage bill, we are still behind, but with a very good trajectory towards the 35. So there are three broad strategies to bring the wage bill ratio to the target stipulated in the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Regulation 2015, and within the ratio to developing countries. These are, one, the GDP and revenue growth outpacing wage bill. And you will also see that in the numbers that we shall share, that indeed the wage bill growth has been lagging GDP growth, and it is also lagging revenue growth. So that's a very good trajectory, that wage bill is growing at a lower pace than the GDP and revenue. And therefore, as we continue that trajectory, and I'm sure the National Treasury will speak more about that, the second broad strategy is about reviewing, setting, and advising on remuneration and benefits within the principle of fiscal sustainability. And the Commission continues to do that, and I'll share a few numbers shortly to demonstrate that. And the third strategy is increased public service productivity. So the ratio of wage bill to GDP has declined from 8.4% in financial year 2017-18 to 7.53 and projected to continue reducing. It is projected to 7.9, as I alluded to it earlier, so against a target of 7.5 for developing countries. As a ratio of revenue, it has declined from 51.54%, and it is projected to 40.45 in 2023-24, against a target of 35%. Further, in the last 2 years, the revenue grew on average by 18.5%, while the wage bill grew on average by 5.6%. So the growth in the average monthly salary per employee was 2.3%. So increase in employee numbers, as I alluded to earlier, will continue to increase in the key sectors, but our concern is the ratio of that absolute amount to revenue. So in terms of the third strategy, in reviewing, setting, and advising on remuneration and benefit, the Commission continuously focuses on fiscal sustainability along with the other principles. In doing this, as an example, SRC continues to check public service wage bill, as demonstrated in a few numbers, which I'll share with you shortly, that on an ongoing basis, the Commission we receive requests from public institutions for review of many areas of the remuneration. Could be salaries through collective bargaining negotiations. It's also allowances. And on an ongoing basis, we receive those requests. We analyze it against the principles that I mentioned earlier. And based on that, we then continuously track what does that mean for the Commission. For example, in 2020-21, we received requests of, the value of the request was 70 billion. 70 billion is the request that we received. Most of these were collective bargaining negotiations, but we also have allowances within that. The Commission reviewed those allowances and only approved 5.9 out of the 70 billion. So it means on that year, the approval was just 8% was approved. In 2021-22, the Commission received requests worth 20.5 billion and only approved 2.6, which is 13%. In 2022-23, we received requests of 8 billion and only approved 4.2, which is about 52%. So in total, just for those 3 years, the Commission received requests worth 98.8 billion and only approved 12.9 billion. So that goes to demonstrate how the Commission is continuously ensuring that the wage bill is not outpacing the revenue or GDP growth by continuously applying the principle of fiscal sustainability. The third strategy, which I talked about, is labor productivity. Kenya's labor productivity remains low compared to other countries. According to the International Labour Organization 2021 statistics on labor productivity, Kenya is ranked at number 151 out of 185 countries globally, and number 2 in Africa is 22 out of 46 countries. Improved labor productivity drives economic growth, which results in higher revenue and in turn improved wage bill to revenue ratio. A collaborative effort is required in public service to drive productivity as a key enabler towards achieving the wage bill to revenue ratio of 35%. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to speak about the final part of our review, which is addressing allowances for state and public officers. In 2021, SRC commenced a process of streamlining allowances to achieve transparency, accountability, equity and fairness in remuneration, and to ensure affordability and fiscal sustainability of the wage bill in the public service. In phase 1, which was implemented in the last financial year, 3 allowances ceased to be payable. These are plenary sitting allowances, ministerial allowance, which resulted in an annual total cost saving of 1.7 billion, and taxable car allowance, resulting in a cost saving of 9.7 billion over a 4-year period. SRC has now completed phase 2, in which 4 allowances have been reviewed, set and or advised as follows. Retreat allowance. Payment of retreat allowance in addition to the basic salary amounts to double compensation and consequently ceases to be payable. Sitting allowance for institutional committees. Payment of sitting allowance for institutional internal committees in addition to the basic salary amounts to double compensation and consequently ceases to be payable. Number 3, task force allowance for institutional internal committees. So payment of this allowance in addition to the basic salary amounts to double compensation and consequently ceases to be payable. The 4th one is daily subsistence allowance. This allowance, the daily subsistence allowance for local travel has been standardized across the country for the respective grades. The prevailing rates for cities will apply. The DSA for foreign travel remains unchanged, save for correction of a few countries. Detailed communication has been made to all public service institutions on these 4 allowances. So ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, this review is about harmonization to achieve equity and fairness in remuneration and benefits in the public service within the principle of fiscal sustainability. The increase maintains the trajectory towards achieving the wage bill to revenue ratio of 35%. Although the trajectory is positive, a lot more needs to be done, especially in the area of productivity. Public service productivity is a transformation agenda that will enable government drive and align the entire public service towards economic growth, high and sustained revenue growth, which will reduce the wage bill to revenue ratio, improve service delivery, competitiveness, and employment creation. SRC continues to urge all public service institutions to improve on productivity and together deliver the country's agenda for the benefits of its citizens. Thank you.